The morning I found out my daughter's 5th birthday party had been cancelled for a gender reveal, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even raise my voice. I stood in my kitchen in our Buckhead estate, holding a crystal glass of cold brew, barefoot on the heated marble floors, staring out at the pool shimmering in the July heat, and I made myself a promise so quiet and so cold it scared even me. Not because of what it was, because of how calm I felt making it. My name is Selena Voss. I am 38 years old. I am a former corporate attorney who left her practice to raise our daughter, a decision I made freely and have never regretted, not once. Not even on the days when the silence of this enormous house pressed in on me like weather. I am the wife of Brennan Voss, VP of Acquisitions at Voss Capital Group, a man I fell in love with over a bad bottle of wine and a 2-hour argument about contract law at a bar in Midtown Atlanta 12 years ago. I am the daughter-in-law of Patrice and Harold Voss, and that, right there, is where the story really begins. The Voss family lives in a particular kind of Atlanta world. Not the new money tech world, not the entertainment money world. Old Atlanta money, the kind that has a family foundation and a box at the Fox Theater and a surname on the wing of a hospital. The kind of money that comes with rules nobody writes down but everybody understands. Patrice Voss, born Patrice Elaine Greer, daughter of a Savannah tobacco distributor, married into that world 41 years ago and spent every single one of those years making herself indispensable to it. She organized the family's charitable giving. She managed Harold's social calendar. She controlled, with a precision that I now recognize as genuinely remarkable, every major family event, every financial gift, every invitation list. She was not Harold's partner. She was Harold's infrastructure. And everyone Harold, Brennan, the extended family, the country club friends, the church ladies, everyone let her be that. Because it was easier than the alternative. Our daughter is Ariana Noelle Voss. She will be 5 years old on the 14th of September. And I want you to understand something about this child before we go any further. Ari is the kind of person who names every spider she finds instead of killing them. She once spent 45 minutes comforting a stranger's crying toddler at a grocery store while I stood there with a cart full of groceries, completely undone by the size of her heart. She has Brennan's dimples and my stubbornness and a laugh that sounds exactly like bells tumbling down a staircase. And I have been in love with her since the moment I saw her face and she looked up at me with those enormous dark eyes like she'd been waiting to find me. Ari is everything. Everything that came after. Every single thing I did began and ended with her. For 8 months, I had been planning her birthday party. Not a small backyard gathering. A full, proper 4-hour celebration at the Magnolia venue, a restored antebellum estate outside Atlanta, converted into an event space, all white columns and live oaks draped in Spanish moss and fairy lights strung through magnolia trees that had been standing since before the Civil War. I booked it in January. I signed a contract. I paid a non-refundable deposit on my personal credit card. I hired a face painter named Daphne who charged $400 for 2 hours and was, according to every review I'd read, genuinely magical with children. I hired a balloon sculptor. I booked a photographer I'd used for Ari's newborn session, a woman named Priya whose work made me cry every time I looked at it. I ordered a custom 4-tier princess cake from a bakery in Midtown that had a 6-week waitlist and used real edible gold leaf on the stars. I had sent invitations, physical ones, with ribbon to 42 children and their families. I had created a playlist. I had designed party favor bags. I had been working on this party the way I used to work on major depositions, with total focus, complete documentation, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that every detail was handled. And then my mother-in-law called me on a Tuesday morning in July. Patrice Voss does not begin phone calls with pleasantries. She begins them with the destination, because she considers the journey your problem. Selena, she said, without hello, without how are you, without any of the social scaffolding that separates human beings from traffic announcements. We've had to move things around for the 14th. Cassidy and Rhett are doing their gender reveal that day, and they've already arranged to use the Magnolia. Harold and I covered the venue deposit as our gift to them. $7,200. It's done. A pause. Then, as though this were the generous part, I'm sure you can find something else lovely for Ari. She's 4. She won't remember either way. I need you to sit with that last sentence for a moment. She's 4. She won't remember either way. Now let me tell you who Cassidy and Rhett are. Rhett Voss is Brennan's first cousin, the son of Harold's younger brother Gage, who has spent 30 years in a simmering competition with Harold that everyone pretends doesn't exist. Rhett is 32, handsome in a way that has always come too easily to him, moderately successful in commercial real estate, and completely unremarkable except for the fact that the Voss family has always treated him like a golden boy because his father never stopped campaigning for him. Cassidy is Rhett's wife of 3 years, 26 years old, a former Miss Coastal Georgia from Savannah, who has the kind of effortless beauty that makes rooms go quiet and the kind of relentless social media presence that makes me understand why so many people are exhausted. Cassidy posts daily, everything filtered gold and warm. She calls Patrice Mama Patrice in her captions. She refers to her pregnancy as our little miracle journey. She had recently announced, to considerable Voss family fanfare, that she and Rhett were expecting their first child, the first grandchild on Harold's brother's side of the family, and Patrice had responded to this news with a level of enthusiasm I had genuinely never seen her direct at anything, including her own son's wedding. Now here is the detail that I need you to hold, the detail that changed everything the moment I understood it fully. Nobody asked me, not Patrice, not Harold, not Brennan, not Rhett, not Cassidy. Nobody called to say, hey, we have a situation, can we talk about this? Nobody offered to help rebook. Nobody acknowledged the contract I had signed, the deposits I had paid, the 8 months of planning, the 42 children whose families had cleared their September 14th. I was informed. The way you inform a vendor of a schedule change. The way you text a contractor to say the project's been pushed. I was logistics. I was a calendar item. And my daughter's birthday was a slot that had been reassigned. Stop. Because here's what you don't know yet. And it's going to change the way you hear everything that comes next. Brennan knew. He had known for 4 days before his mother called me. He told me so that evening, when I stood in our bedroom with my arms at my sides and my voice so controlled it didn't sound like mine, and I asked him point blank. He did that thing, that rubbing the back of the neck thing he does when he's deciding how much truth to portion out, and said, Mom mentioned it last Thursday and I figured she was going to call you. I didn't want to be the one caught in the middle of it. He said it like the middle of it was a minor social inconvenience and not the complete erasure of his daughter's birthday plans by his own family. You know how she is, he added. And I looked at him, really looked at him, the way you look at a person when you're deciding something final, and I said, yeah, Brennan, I do. He thought that was the end of it. He went back to scrolling his phone. I went to our bathroom, ran the shower, sat on the edge of the tub, and spent 20 minutes being very, very quiet inside my own head. And in that quiet, something in me stopped being patient in the old way and started being patient in a completely different way. The kind of patience that looks identical from the outside but has an entirely different engine running underneath it. Here is something I want you to understand about the Voss family before I tell you what I did, because you need to know what I was working inside of. The Voss family does not have arguments. They have realignments. Patrice does not fight with people. She reassigns them in the hierarchy, quietly, efficiently, and with a smile so practiced it's become genuine. I had watched her do it to Harold's sister, Renata, over a decade ago, over something to do with a beach house schedule. I had watched her do it to Gage, Rhett's father, in a way so subtle and sustained that Gage had developed what I can only describe as a permanent low-grade fury that he managed with golf and bourbon. I had watched her do it, smaller and gentler and over years, to me. The difference between me and Renata, and the difference between me and Gage, is that I used to be a litigator. I know how a case is built. I know what evidence looks like before anyone else in the room recognizes it as evidence. And I had been, without quite meaning to, building one for years. I rebooked Ari's party. I found a venue, the Hargrove Garden Estate in Roswell, smaller than the Magnolia, but genuinely beautiful, with a rose garden and a stone fountain and a private lawn that I knew immediately Ari would love. I confirmed every vendor. I sent a note to every family on the guest list explaining the venue change with exactly the right amount of warmth and zero indication that anything was wrong. I attended Cassidy and Rhett's gender reveal on September 14th. I wore a pale blue dress. I smiled. I exclaimed. I held a glass of champagne and toasted the baby boy they were expecting and hugged Cassidy and told her she looked radiant. Which she did, because she always did, and I meant it. Because my feelings about Cassidy were genuinely complicated, and I'll explain why in a moment. I brought Patrice a compliment about the venue decor. I watched her accept it like a toll. I made small talk with Harold. I played long games with Rhett's college friends. And inside all of that, completely invisible, I was working, because here's where the story cracks open. Here's the thing I haven't told you yet. In March of this year, 5 months before the phone call, Brennan had come home from a late meeting and poured himself a scotch at the kitchen island and said, in the offhand way married people share information they assume will never matter. Dad's finance team flagged some irregularities in the entertainment accounts. Nothing major probably, just some categorization issues. They're bringing in someone to do a review. He said it the way you'd mention that the dry cleaner lost a button. Informational, forgettable. He poured his scotch and went upstairs, and that was the end of it. For him, for me, that sentence went into a file I didn't know I was keeping. Right next to the receipt I'd photographed at Christmas. Right next to what Cassidy had whispered to me over Chenin Blanc at a family dinner in May. Right next to the vendor invoices I'd noticed at Patrice's house. Filed in a kitchen desk drawer in a folder labeled Magnolia Events invoices that were signed not in Patrice's personal name but with a notation that read Peg Consulting, authorized representative. Someone had sent a forensic financial report to the full Voss Capital Board of Directors, 6 members. Delivered simultaneously, with read receipts itemizing, in exact and documented detail, 37 months of personal expenses that Patrice had run through the company's discretionary entertainment fund. The report had a cover page. It had a professional certification seal. It had 72 pages of transactions, dates, vendors, amounts, and cross-reference documentation. It was, in the language of financial disclosure, airtight, and nobody in that room, not Patrice, not Harold, not Brennan when he called in a panic 20 minutes later, had any idea who sent it. They didn't know who had assembled it. They didn't know where the information had come from. They didn't know how someone outside the company's finance team had obtained detailed transaction records and traced them back to personal expenditures with that level of precision and legal documentation, but I did. I had known for exactly 13 days. I had been sitting on that knowledge the way you sit on a verdict you've already written, waiting for the right moment to hand it to the jury, and now you are finally asking the right question. You're asking, Selena, who sent it? How did you do this? And why did you wait? Why did you sit at that breakfast table saying nothing while the woman who erased your daughter's birthday party fell apart 5 feet away from you? I am going to tell you everything, but not yet. Because first you need to understand what was really inside that report. And what was inside it is not just financial misconduct. What was inside it is a secret Patrice had been keeping for 4 years, a secret that implicated not just her, not just Voss Capital, but someone else in this family entirely. Someone whose name changes this story completely, I hadn't known what it meant when I saw it. I just knew it felt wrong. And I photographed it on my phone the way I used to photograph document irregularities for depositions automatically, precisely, without making a decision about it yet. Here is the question you should be asking right now. Why would a woman planning her daughter's birthday party be photographing invoices in her mother-in-law's kitchen drawer at Christmas? The answer is, she wouldn't. Not unless she'd been paying attention for years to something she couldn't quite name. Not unless she'd been living inside a family where the surface was so polished and the undercurrents so strong that you learn slowly, instinctively, the way animals learn whether to notice when something was off. I had been noticing for 10 years. I had been dismissing what I noticed for 10 years because I was trying to be a good wife, because I kept telling myself that family was complicated and Patrice was difficult but not malicious and Brennan loved me even when he failed me. Because I was a mother now and mothers absorb things so their children don't have to, but there is a limit. And canceling my daughter's 5th birthday party without discussion, without apology, with the casual certainty that I would simply rearrange was mine. 2 weeks after Cassidy's gender reveal, something happened that none of us were prepared for. Patrice was eating breakfast. Harold was in the study. I was at the table because Brennan had asked me to come by to discuss the catering contract for the holiday gala, something Patrice managed annually for Voss Capital's client dinner. I had a croissant and a coffee and my phone face down on the table, and Patrice was going through her emails on her iPad with the focused irritation she brought to all administrative tasks. When her phone buzzed, she picked it up. She opened the email. She read approximately 4 lines. And then she went the exact color of old parchment, all the warmth drained out in under 5 seconds, and her hand began to shake so visibly that her coffee cup rattled against its saucer. She did not scream immediately. She made a sound first, a short, compressed sound, like something being punctured, and then she screamed. Not at me, not at anyone in the room, just screamed. The way you scream when the ground disappears under you. Harold came at a run from the study, still in his bathrobe, reading glasses pushed up on his head. He took one look at her face and said, "Patrice, what happened?" And she shoved the phone at him. He read. He went still in a way I had never seen Harold Voss go still before. The kind of still that doesn't come from calm, it comes from the sudden, catastrophic collapse of a belief you didn't know you were holding. I watched all of this. I finished my coffee. I set the cup down carefully. I said nothing, because here is what was in that email. Here is what made Patrice Voss's hands shake and Harold Voss go silent and the entire Buckhead estate feel, for the first time in 10 years, like a building with a cracked foundation. I want to tell you something about patience that most people misunderstand. Patience is not passive. Real patience, the kind that wins, is the most active thing a person can do. It requires you to know exactly what you're building, exactly when to release it, and exactly how to be in the room when it lands without leaving a single fingerprint on the moment. I had been practicing that kind of patience my whole legal career. I just never thought I'd need it inside my own marriage. Let me take you all the way back to June, 6 weeks before Patrice's phone call about the Magnolia. I was having lunch with Tamsin Ford at Bacchanalia, a restaurant in the West Midtown neighborhood of Atlanta where the tables are far apart and the noise level is perfectly calibrated for private conversation. Tamsin and I have been friends since our first year at Emory Law School, when we were assigned adjacent carrels in the library and bonded over the shared misery of first semester contracts. She is brilliant, genuinely, uncomfortably brilliant, and she spent 15 years as a forensic accountant and financial investigator for a boutique firm in Atlanta before going independent 4 years ago. She is also someone who listens the way good attorneys listen, completely, without interrupting, and with the specific quality of attention that means she is already 3 steps ahead of what you are saying. I told her everything, not because I was planning anything, not yet. I told her because I had been carrying the weight of 10 years of Voss family dynamics and I needed someone clear-eyed and legally sophisticated to tell me if I was being dramatic or if I was, in fact, seeing something real. I told her about the entertainment account audit Brennan had mentioned in passing. I told her about the PEG consulting notation on the invoices in Patrice's kitchen drawer. I told her about the vendor payments I'd noticed on joint tax documents Brennan had left open on his home office desktop, payments categorized as business entertainment that lined up, in my memory, with events I knew had been personal. I showed her the photographs I'd taken on my phone at Christmas. I told her about Cassidy's whispered comment at the May family dinner, which I'll come back to in a moment because it is the thread that unraveled everything. Tamsin listened to all of it without speaking. She ate 3 bites of her salmon. She drank some of her water. Then she said, very quietly, "Selena, you're not being dramatic. You're being a lawyer. And you have been, without knowing it, building a predicate for financial misconduct for 2 years." She paused. I want to look at this, not as a favor, as a professional inquiry, because what you're describing, if it's accurate, is a matter of public record that a licensed forensic accountant has both the right and arguably the obligation to examine. She looked at me evenly across the table. But I need you to understand what we might find, and I need you to be prepared for what happens when we find it. I told her I understood. What I didn't tell her, what I didn't fully understand yet myself, was how deep it actually went. Tamsin spent 5 weeks working. She pulled Voss Capital's publicly filed business disclosures with the Georgia Secretary of State. She cross-referenced the entertainment funds reported expenditures with publicly available vendor records, catering companies, florists, event venues that had done business under the Voss Capital name. She used her professional network completely legally to trace payment patterns between entities. She did not hack anything. She did not access any private financial records without authorization. She did not break a single law. The information was there in the sunlight for anyone with the training to read it. Most people don't have that training. Tamsin has it in her bones. What she found in the first 2 weeks was what I'd suspected. Patrice had been categorizing personal event expenses, family venue bookings, personal catering, her own wardrobe purchases from a boutique in Buckhead, floral arrangements for the house, even 2 first-class flights to a spa weekend in Scottsdale she'd taken with her sister as Voss Capital entertainment expenditures. The amounts individually were not enormous. Collectively, over 37 months, they added up to something that made Tamsin sit back in her chair and say, on our second call, "Okay, this is not careless accounting. This is intentional." But the second thing Tamsin found, the thing that changed the entire shape of what I was looking at, came in week 3. And I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now and pay attention. Patrice had registered a limited liability company, not under her married name, under a variation of her maiden name, Patrice Elaine Greer, doing business as PEG Events Consulting. The company was registered in Georgia, had a registered agent, had a business bank account. PEG Events Consulting had been paid, on 12 separate occasions over 3 years, by Voss Capital's entertainment fund as a vendor and event consulting firm for event coordination services. The payments ranged from $1,800 to $6,000 each. The problem, the beautiful, devastating, completely documentable problem, was that PEG Events Consulting had never filed a tax return, had no employees, had no documented clients other than Voss Capital, had no website, no professional presence, no evidence of having provided any actual services to anyone. It existed on paper for one purpose: to receive payments from Voss Capital that were then transferred to Patrice's personal account. Patrice had been paying herself from her husband's company through a shell company registered in her maiden name for services she had never performed. That is not a categorization error. That is not sloppy bookkeeping. That has a specific legal name, and that name ends with consequences. Now here is where Cassidy comes back into the picture. Because Cassidy is not the woman I initially thought she was. And this is the part of the story I've been protecting. Because it matters to the moral. At the family dinner in May, 3 weeks before Patrice's phone call, Cassidy had leaned across to me, 2 glasses of Chenin Blanc in, read deep in conversation with Harold at the other end of the table, and said in a low voice, "Can I tell you something kind of wild? Between us?" I said, "Of course." She said, "Rhett's dad Gage has been trying to get an accounting of the Voss Capital Entertainment Fund for 2 years. He thinks Patrice has been running personal expenses through it for years. Harold won't discuss it. Patrice shuts it down every time it comes up, and Gage he's convinced something is going on. He brought it to a family attorney last year, and the attorney told him he need internal financial documents to proceed, and he can't get them because Patrice controls Harold's access to that stuff, and Harold he doesn't want the fight." She paused. Then she said, carefully, "Between us, I think Gage is right. The numbers I've seen on some of the event invoices Rhett found in his dad's files don't add up. But nobody will do anything because it's Patrice." I held that very still inside me for 3 weeks. Then, after Patrice's phone call about the birthday party, I called Tamsin. And once Tamsin confirmed what she'd found, I did the most calculated thing I have ever done in my adult life. I invited Cassidy to lunch. Just the 2 of us. I chose a private table at a restaurant in Virginia Highland where I knew the ambient sound was enough to cover conversation. I ordered wine. I let Cassidy talk about the pregnancy for 20 minutes, and I want to be honest, this wasn't difficult, because Cassidy is genuinely warm and I have never disliked Cassidy. What I disliked was the way she was being used, without knowing it, as a prop for Patrice's agenda. The gender reveal party Patrice had thrown Cassidy at my daughter's expense, funded by company money Cassidy had not asked for. Cassidy had not known about the birthday party conflict. Cassidy had not known the venue had been paid for with anything other than Patrice's personal funds. Cassidy, I had come to understand, was not the villain of this story. She was collateral beautiful, Instagram perfect, completely unaware collateral. So when I said to her, toward the end of lunch, "Cassidy, what would Rhett's dad say if someone handed him exactly the documentation his attorney told him he needed?" She went very still. She put down her fork. She looked at me for a long moment with those pageant queen eyes that are sharper than anyone gives them credit for. And she said, "I would say make sure it's professional, certified, legally clean, because Patrice will fight dirty if she has any ammunition." I said, "It will have a certified forensic accountant's name and professional seal on every page." Another silence. Then Cassidy said quietly, "Selena, she canceled your daughter's birthday party. It wasn't a question." "I know," I said. "I know she did," Cassidy said. "And I didn't know that when all of this was arranged. I want you to know that." I told her I believed her. Because I did. What happened next took 6 more weeks to assemble, verify, and finalize. Tamsin Ford did not stop at the Georgia LLC. Because Tamsin, once she is on a financial trail, follows it the way water follows gravity, completely and without hesitation. The Tennessee account emerged in week 7. A second LLC, registered under yet another variation of Patrice's maiden name, Elaine P. Greer Consulting, based in Nashville, had been receiving transfers from PEG Events Consulting since its creation 26 months ago. This second company had also never filed taxes, also had no documented clients, also had a bank account that received money in and paid it out to a single personal account, a savings account in Patrice's name alone, at a bank different from the one she and Harold used jointly. Tamsin traced its opening date. It had been opened 11 days after the internal audit of Voss Capital's entertainment accounts had been first mentioned internally, as if someone had known the audit was coming and moved the money upstream. The total, including both entities, including all 37 months, including every personal expenditure, was $214,000. Not small. Not a categorization error. Not anything that could be explained away as a misunderstanding between a wife and her husband's company. $214,000 moved through 2 shell companies over 3 years, unreported on personal taxes. Tamsin's report was 72 pages. It had her name, her professional certification number, her digital signature, and her contact information on the cover. It was addressed to the Voss Capital Board of Directors. It was delivered by secure encrypted email on a Monday morning at 10:15. 6 recipients, 6 read receipts, all confirmed within 22 minutes of delivery. I had no fingerprints on it. I had not sent it. I had not assembled it. I had shared information with a licensed forensic accountant who had conducted an independent professional inquiry using publicly available records, and who had found what she found and reported it to the appropriate parties. I had not accessed any private financial records. I had not done a single thing that could be characterized as illegal, retaliatory, or improper. I was a woman who had told her college friend about some financial irregularities she'd noticed, and her friend had done her job. I was at Patrice's breakfast table that morning because Brennan had asked me to come by to look at the holiday gala catering contract. I was drinking coffee. I was eating a croissant. I was wearing a cream silk blouse and my hair was up, and I had on the pearl earrings Brennan gave me for our 8th anniversary. I looked, in every possible way, like a woman who had come to discuss party catering. And when Patrice's phone buzzed and she opened the email and went the color of old paper and started shaking, I watched. I finished my coffee. I set the cup down. I said nothing at all, because here is the thing I had learned after 10 years inside the Voss family. The moment of consequence is not the time for drama. Drama is for people who aren't sure they've won. I was sure. Harold called Brennan before I left the driveway. Brennan called me 40 minutes later, voice stretched tight, saying something's happened with Mom and the company accounts. Some kind of report got sent to the board. Do you know anything about this? And I said completely honestly, completely calmly, Brennan, I have spent the last 4 months focused on planning our daughter's birthday party. I don't have anything to do with your father's company finances. A silence. Right, he said. Yeah, okay. He believed me, because it was true. Every word of it was true. Now let me tell you what happened next. Because this is where Patrice fought back. And she did fight back, of course she did. She retained an attorney within 48 hours. She issued a statement to the Voss Capital Board claiming that all expenditures had been verbally authorized by Harold over the years, that the entity registrations were legitimate business structures for event planning services she had genuinely provided, and that the report was the product of a personal vendetta by a family member who remained unnamed. The board engaged an outside audit firm regardless. The audit began within the week. Meanwhile, the Magnolia venue had also received a copy of Tamsin's documented trace of the $1,800 payment from PEG Events, consulting to a venue coordinator named Becca Salter, a payment made in exchange for voiding my January booking contract without notifying me. The Magnolia's ownership, faced with documented evidence that one of their coordinators had accepted a bribe to breach a signed client contract, terminated Salter's employment immediately and issued me a formal written apology as the original contract holder whose booking had been fraudulently voided. They refunded my original deposit in full. They offered a complimentary rebooking credit with an upgraded room and complimentary lighting package. I called Patrice's attorney and informed him, through my own retained counsel, a former colleague from my firm days, a woman named Gloria Reeves, who is one of the finest civil litigators in Georgia, that I was prepared to pursue a civil claim for the fraudulent voiding of my contract if any of the current proceedings affected my family's position. Gloria sent one letter. It was 3 pages long. It said everything that needed to be said. We never had to file anything. Gage Voss, Rhett's father, retained family law counsel and formally requested a complete accounting of Harold's trust distributions. Harold, who had spent 3 days in a kind of stunned silence that I found genuinely painful to watch, did not resist. He cooperated with the outside auditors. He confirmed that he had not verbally authorized the expenditures. He confirmed he had not known about the LLC registrations. He confirmed a great many things that Patrice had apparently counted on him to deny. Harold Voss is many things. He is not, in the end, a man who will commit perjury for his wife. The Georgia Department of Revenue was notified of PEG Events Consulting's unfiled tax returns by the outside audit firm. The Tennessee entity followed. A tax examination was opened. Patrice's personal attorney began negotiating with Voss Capital's board to avoid criminal referral, which meant a structured repayment agreement, the relinquishment of her beneficiary status in the company's family benefit provisions, and a formal written acknowledgement of misconduct. The negotiation took 11 weeks. It was not pleasant, by any account I received secondhand, and Brennan. I need to tell you about Brennan, because the story is not just about Patrice. The story is about what happens to a marriage when one person has been absorbing the cost of another person's avoidance for years. Brennan did not speak to me directly about any of it for 12 days. I did not push. I had made peace with his silence as a part of the process, the thing that had to pass before we could get to the real conversation. On the 13th day, he came home from a meeting with Harold's attorneys and sat down at the kitchen island and said, very quietly, "Did you know?" Before it happened, and I looked at him for a long time. And then I said the most honest thing I have ever said in our marriage. I knew your mother bribed a venue coordinator to void my signed contract so she could give our daughter's birthday venue to your cousin's gender reveal. I told a forensic accountant what I had seen, and she found what she found. That's the truth, Brennan. That's all of it. He was quiet. I said, your mother called me and told me, not asked me, told me that our daughter's 5th birthday party had been cancelled. She said Ari was 4 and wouldn't remember. And you knew, and you said nothing for 4 days, because you didn't want to be in the middle. I need you to understand that I have been in the middle for 10 years, alone, while you stood on the edge. And I'm done with that. He didn't say anything for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, through the windows, the pool was perfectly still in the evening light. Finally he said, I know I did that. It was the first time in our marriage he had said those words in that order without a qualifier attached. Without a but, without a you have to understand, just, I know I did that. I almost cried. I didn't. But I almost did. Brennan started therapy 3 weeks later. His own decision. He told me on a Sunday morning over coffee, matter-of-factly, like it was a practical arrangement, which meant it was something he was genuinely doing rather than performing. I told him I thought that was right. I meant it. Ari's 5th birthday party was held on the 14th of September at the Magnolia venue. The rebooking credit covered the upgrade. The room was bathed in soft gold light. The fairy lights and the magnolia trees outside were lit from late afternoon, and the September evening came in warm and purple and slow. Daphne the face painter was there. The balloon sculptor was there. Priya was there with her camera. The 4-tier princess cake with edible gold stars was on a table draped in blush linen. 42 children ran through the rose garden and around the stone fountain and across the wide lawn while their parents stood in small clusters with drinks, laughing. Ari wore a pink tulle dress and a rhinestone crown that she picked herself, and she spent 4 consecutive hours in a state of pure, incandescent joy, insisting that every child at the party address her as Princess Commander and organizing elaborate games that she invented and changed the rules of whenever it suited her, which it did frequently because she is 5 and already understands that the person who controls the rules controls the room. She gets that from me. Harold was there. He arrived with a giant stuffed elephant that Ari immediately named Butterscotch and carried everywhere for the rest of the party. He stood by the cake table for most of the afternoon looking like a man who had been taken apart and put back together slightly differently, which he had, but he was there. When Ari ran up to him and said, "Grandpa Big, Look at my crown. It's real rhinestones. He crouched down to her level and said, "You look like a real princess, baby girl," and his voice cracked just slightly, and I looked away to give him the moment. Patrice was not there. Patrice was managing a financial negotiation that would consume her for 3 more months and restructure her role in the Voss family permanently. She was not Princess Commander. She was not in charge of anything anymore. The infrastructure had shifted. Cassidy posted a photo from the party on her Instagram, just one, Ari in her crown, the golden evening light falling across the garden. The caption said only, "Happy birthday, Princess Commander. You deserve the world." 20 to 100 likes. I screenshot it and kept it, because in a story with very few uncomplicated moments, that one was genuinely uncomplicated. I want to give you the moral I promised. Not a tidy one. Not a soft one wrapped in a lesson. A true one. Power that mistakes control for love will eventually consume everything it claims to protect. Patrice Voss did not lose her position in this family because I destroyed her. She lost it because she had been hollowing out the foundation for years quietly, efficiently, with a velvet grip and a checkbook, and when the weight of it finally exceeded what the structure could bear, she went down with it. I did not pull the building. I simply, finally, stopped holding it up. I kept my daughter's party. I kept my marriage, the real one, the hard one, the one where we are now doing the work of being honest with each other in ways we hadn't managed in years. I kept my dignity because I never raised my voice, never sent a single vindictive message, never did a single thing I would be ashamed to describe in a deposition. I did what I was trained to do. I documented, I connected, I waited, and I let the truth do what truth does when you give it enough room and enough time. My name is Selena Voss. I am a mother. I am a former attorney who never quite stopped being one. I am a woman who kept quiet for 10 years and then chose, at the exact right moment, to stop. And if anyone in the Voss family, anyone who watched what happened and is still calculating, still thinking about what they're owed, still wondering if they could take something from my daughter and not pay for it, if anyone is still thinking that, now they know who I am. They know what I'm capable of. They know I have patience and precision and the contacts and the will. And I promise you they will not make that mistake again. My daughter is 5 years old. She had her party. She was Princess Commander. And I was there, standing at the edge of the lawn in the September light, watching her run, finally at peace, finally sovereign, finally at the top of the only hierarchy that has ever mattered to me, the one where my child is protected, and her mother is not someone you want to underestimate. Not ever again. Power that mistakes control for love will eventually consume everything it claims to protect. Quick check-in: where are you watching from? Drop it below, and make sure to subscribe for upcoming stories. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. A new story is coming soon. Until then, stay strong and don't lose hope.